grace of God. Behavior is your savior. You will never have rest. You practice religion from the flesh. Oh, why do you hate free grace? Romans 3:24 says we're freely justified by grace. Ephesians 2:8 says it's by grace, not of works, so that no man may boast. You say faith must work to save, but that's another gospel. Galatians 1:6-9 puts that lie to rest. You're cursed if you preach a perverted gospel. Why do you limit the free grace of God? Romans 5:20 says it's hyperabounding grace, but you say it's limited to behavior and performance. You liars. John 1:14 says it's unlimited grace, because if he is full of truth and that truth is infinite, then his grace is infinite too. Why do you fight what God gives free? Eternal life is not a wage, it's a gift. You see, you add repentance, tears, and law, but salvation is by faith alone, flawless and raw. You chain grace to effort, but Paul says it's not of yourself. Grace and works don't mix, so put your doing on the shelf. Oh, why do you hate free grace? You act like Jesus needs your help. You mock the blood that paid it all, then puff your pride like self-made wealth. You don't believe the promise, you just perform in stress. You call it faith, but it's a mask, a treadmill in a fleshly dress. 1 John 5:13 says we know we have life, not hope, not maybe, not if I strive. Jesus said in John 6:47, who believes in me has life, that's heaven. So, why do you hate free grace? You trade the gift for a religious race. You doubt the cross and flaunt your best, but you'll never have peace, you'll never have rest.
Ve'ahavta lechrei akamo mocha'ani Yahweh. But you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Good to see everybody. But this will be a Chattel slavery debate review from Jill. Happened last night, actually. Versus Objective Ethics, the guy's name is, and I challenged him, formally challenged him, and I think we're gonna debate coming down the road, maybe, hopefully. Yeah, so this happened on, let me see what channel this was. Robin Webster. So Robin Webster's channel, and I'm just going to review it and expose the agnostic atheist in his fraudulent scholarship. It's I feel like it's cherry picking scholarship, invalid points, and I plan to show that with my own scholarship. And nothing against Jill or anything, but I think, Jill did bring some scholarship to the debate, but I do think he could have did better with bringing more scholarship to the debate. And, that's his decision. I thought Jill did pretty well defending the fundamentals of the Torah and what we call servitude. So debt servitude. I think that's exactly what happened in the Mosaic covenant, is basically debt servitude. And it was not because it was imposed on anybody, it's because it was required to survive. And that's just the nature of the ancient Near East, that this was implemented. And I feel like I think their system back then was even better than our system today, taking care of people that are destitute and homeless. And there wouldn't be any homeless back then. So, hold on one. Oops, I had a little bit of an echo there, but yeah. So it was a system to remove destitution, any type of people being in a situation that would be troublesome and actually dangerous without some type of debt servitude. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into this. I feel like there's so much to expose here. There's just so much, and I don't. I just I'm gonna forecast what's gonna happen if I challenge this guy. I just don't see him gonna do it. But hey, maybe he will. I'd be great if he did, because I could use him to expose the frauds out there, like Justin from Deconverted Zone or Deconstruction Zone, Josh Bowen, Dan McClellan, and they know I have their number. So good to see ya, Akkadian. Here we go. Let's pull it up now and get started.
For your other thing too, right?
Yep, I'm ready when you are.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, wait a minute. Let me get all this figured out here. Where's my other picture?
Is it scrolling up and down right now? I don't have the window open because I have to have it split between my Word document and then my screen share. So I can't see the restream screen anymore. So you have to let me know if you can see my screen. Am I scrolling up and down right now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect.
All right. And as soon as you give me a second, as soon as you start talking, then we'll start timer. So.
Perfect. All right, everybody. I appreciate everybody stopping by today. My name is Daniel Leroy. I go by Objective Ethics on YouTube. I probably know a lot of you in the chat. It's so great to have you come by and support Robin's channel. I appreciate Jill for showing up tonight and participating in the debate. I appreciate Robin for facilitating this and for hosting it and for.
Well, I think normative. I would have used normative because that's the scholarship language. Prescriptive you can use, and yes, scholars do use it, but I think it's preferable to use normative. Is slavery normative in the ancient Near East? Well, especially Israel, specifically Israel. And the answer is no. And I can prove it too. I'm going to give actual citations for this. Is why, maybe Jill just wanted to go more. Jill does it in a different way than me. I just hit him with scholarship, but also, obviously hermeneutics as well. But anyway.
Hizzle for moderating the debate tonight. So my opening is going to be a little bit longer than I thought because I just got informed here last minute that we're changing the prompt. I'm going to go ahead and work with the new prompt. My understanding was going to be condoned slavery. Now we're switching it to prescribed slavery. So let's get into the definitions of what a prescription is.
My man Bertie, good to see you, buddy. Awesome.
A prescriptive approach focuses on how things ought to be, establishing norms, rules, or standards to guide behavior, language, or decision making. Prescriptive methods often come from authority, tradition, or formal guidelines and imply a judgment of right or wrong. Whereas descriptive approaches, in contrast, focuses on how things actually are.
Yeah, and see, the atheists are, I'm just going to call them the liberal scholarship view is a straw man of even how the Torah is supposed to be understood. The Torah, So, first of all, the Pentateuch is not even supposed to be looked at as a rule book. It's the Torah is not even supposed to be understood that way. In fact, the Torah is supposed to be understood as wisdom, as didactic. It's supposed to be looked at as something that's didactic, and we've seen the ancient Near East. It's an overwhelming consensus that especially the casuistic law framework of the Torah is not supposed to be looked as legislative. There's nothing legislative anywhere. They've had numerous scholarship on this. There's this, it's inundated with scholarship where they even like Pamela Barmash, like there's like she's written numerous citations on this about how that there was no court documents of anything being legislative at all. And see, I'm going to get to the main point of all this. The reason why it's not legislative is because it's not comprehensive law. It's not exhaustive law. So if it's not exhaustive law, then what is it? How do we understand the framework of the Torah? Well, it's supposed to be looked at as paradigmatic law, that there's 2 or 3 principles that the whole law is supposed to be it undergirds the whole law with on 2 examples. So 2 or 3 laws reflect the whole 613 laws, and 613 laws is not many laws. Like if we look at today's laws, there's thousands of laws or codes that we have today, and we would say this is more legislative law today. Well, it's not legislated back then for that very reason. It was never intended to be exhaustive law or the letter of the law. It's the spirit of the law. But anyway, those are just a few points that I think need to be made that in this debate, I think unfortunately did not get voiced in this debate. So let me just take care of something really quick on Facebook. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, there we go. Good to see you, Kevin. What's up, buddy? I seen you last night on, was it Brandon's channel, and you were talking to this some heretic that was terrible. I forget what it is, but it was just saying weird things, man. It was kind of off-putting listening to that. Like Brandon, I'm not sure what the heck was going on there. I just listened a few minutes. Anyway, I don't want to get caught up or get derailed here. So law in the ancient Near East is not comprehensive, exhaustive law, period. It's paradigmatic law. So there's 2 or 3 laws that are the overarching laws that all the laws are supposed to reflect. And what are these few laws? Well, loving your neighbor and loving God. Those are the two laws that all the laws reflect, or that the law is intended to, the telos of the law. We call the telos the purpose, the direction where the law is supposed to be. The intention of the law is supposed to be focused at loving God and loving your neighbor. And obviously, Paul even said that if you love your neighbor, you don't wish ill will to your neighbor. There's no ill will. Love doesn't afford ill will. So let me pull that up really quick. And so this will kind of lay the framework for tonight's response. Is we can prove as Christians, say we're Christians here. Yes, Judaism, or I hate to call it Judaism, but it's like Judeo-Christianity is also part of the Christianity is the Old Testament. And rather the atheists or agnostics agree that is completely irrelevant. I could care less. And I don't care if they think it's 2 completely different religions or not. I don't care. I think the Jews purposely suppress the Jews today. Anyway, they call themselves Jews anyway. I don't even consider them real Jews, because Paul even says in Romans 2:23 that a true Jew is one inwardly, spiritually, not physical Jews. So I would say that I don't accept the premise that the Jews have their own religion and own views, because I don't even consider them really Jews in the first place. As far as the biblical Jews concerned, they might be genetically somehow, but again, I think Romans 2:23 lays the standard for what a true Jew is anyway. Oh no, not much, Kevin. Just chilling around here, just making responses to a lot of these liars that spread misinformation, falsehoods about the Old Testament and what they call slavery. It's just a socioeconomic system to prevent poverty. That's all it is. And they had a different environment back then. Like their conditions of living is not, they didn't have hospitals, they didn't have planes, trains, automobiles, they didn't have post offices, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have social media, they didn't have any of these things available to them. But there are some weird things like with the pyramids and stuff, though. So I don't know. They had some stuff that's really weird. I have to tell you, the ancient Near East is fascinating. But yeah, let's continue on here.
Observing and documenting real world usage or behavior without imposing rules or judgment.
So is this guy claiming that biblical, the Torah, the casuistic laws are prescriptive? By definition, they're not prescriptive. That's what casuistic law is. And maybe Jill kind of, I'm not trying to, because I think Jill did a great job. He has his own style of debating, but my style is I come at you technically. I come at you with full barrel scholarship, and like no one has even touched it. Josh Bowen hasn't. He hasn't responded, countered this. Dan McClellan hasn't. Justin hasn't. So, this guy got off easy as far as scholarship, because if it was me, I would have blew him out of the water with scholarship. But in fact, let me just pull up the show just to get us started with the scholarship, to provide scholarship with the overall consensus when it comes to the laws of the ancient as far as Israel is concerned, being not prescriptive, but descriptive, not normative. They're not normative. And see, how do you legislate love anyway? So how you can't legislate love? It's stupid. It's a stupid pursuit to even go down. A stupid endeavor. God never intended the law to be exhaustive law, like a rule book. That's not how the law is. There's wisdom to the law. It's didactic to the practitioner. It's only relevant to the practitioner. And let me pull this up here just to demonstrate that. And it's terrible blunders of this other agnostic guy, which I challenged, and maybe he'll accept my challenge on Donnie's channel. And I mean, that would just be right. I mean, giving an L to the agnostic side, because they know I put a book out there even exposing all this stuff, full of scholarship. But the book is full of scholarship citations. Let me pull that up really quick, though, just as a quick example here. Just give me a second. Going through my whole book, and it's just, yeah. One thing I like what Jill did is bring up adoption through manumission. I thought that was a great job by Jill. So it's just me and Jill have different. We both together debated several times Josh Bowen, but it's just Jill has a different style. That's all. Here we go. I got the citation here from Michael Lefebvre. So this is Michael Lefebvre. The name Jill sounds Calvo. He is definitely Calvinist. And we voiced our disagreement with him on that. But we still love Jill. And, he is Jill's Jill. So this is a quote by Michael Lefebvre. This is from Collection Codes and Torah, the Recharacterization of Israel's Law, page 31. So listen to what Michael Lefebvre says here. It'll be a couple seconds, or a little bit here, but it will get through it. And I think the point will be made that it's ridiculous to even go down the road of biblical law being legislative or normative. It's not. It's not legislative. It's not normative. Here we go. Nevertheless, it is no longer permissible to assume Hebrew law writings were legislation. This was the long dominant view. So it's basically obsolete. So the Josh Bowens, the Dan McClellans, and also the Justins from Deconstruction Zone, whatever, Converted Zone, they have an obsolete view. And this guy tonight or last night also has an obsolete view. It was long the dominant view, but it was a dominant view by assumption. So they assume this stuff. They don't understand they don't understand law and grace. They don't understand how God, the spiritual things are spiritually discerned, as Paul said. The natural man receiveth not the things of the spirit. They don't understand this. The Bible is a spiritual book. This isn't a scientific book. This isn't an ancient Near Eastern, like we're looking at the Canaanites, and this is a completely different book or understanding. And I know they like to lump it in with the other books or the other religions at that time, but it's completely distinct and differentiated. I mean, even when you get down to the Torah, it even tells about fabrics to wear, because they wanted to be distinct and separated, set apart from any other culture back then. They were the Hebrews were unique. They were, or at least by convention, they were unique. But the Hebrews were some sinful people too. But anyway, with the heuristic offerings of the cuneiform studies, reassessment of the Hebrew law writings has become necessary. So scholars have reassessed how they understand biblical law, the law codes of the Torah, the Pentateuch. Such reassessment has brought a growing consensus that ancient Israel's law collections also were not legislation, period. They're not normative. Even if Hebrew law does differ in marked ways from Mesopotamian law, nonetheless, in this respect, there are similarities. Law writings in the ancient Israel were idyllic. So I want to focus on that word idyllic. What does idyllic mean? So idyllic, it means in a Arcadian, simple, it's it's just talking about something that is supposed to be taken in a non-literal poetic sense. It's not supposed to be taken as a rule book. I think that's it's just even misunderstanding the law. The function of the law itself is these liberal scholars don't even get the genre of the law to be correct to begin with. So this is where we're like talking past each other. If we can't even get to that understanding, a lot of these debates are just going to be the liberal scholarship is just going to be talking past us at that point. So if they're poetic, they're wisdomic, if they don't get that part, then they're going to bomb the whole thing. They're going to screw up the whole other part of the law, how the law operates. So anyway, so let's move on to, so these law writings in the ancient Israel are idyllic, not legislative. You can't legislate love. That's the whole point of the law. The whole point of the law is love. And yes, we are Christians, and that's stated in the New Testament all throughout, but it's even in the Old Testament too. I'll show you that as well. one is still apt to encounter scholarship treating the Hebrew law writings as though they were statutory. And this is the goofballs that we have to deal with the liberal scholars. They treat the Torah as if they were statutory. So the legislative assumption is still too easy to slide into. Philip Davies aptly notes, notwithstanding the legislative view is probably now regarded by most scholars as naive and obsolete. This is what I've said to the beginning. To claim that there's laws that were legislative, normative, prescriptive is naive and obsolete. Scholars just don't hold that view. So the general consensus is that Israel wrote laws for idyllic, not regulatory purposes. So even if the skeptic out there wanted to charge the God of the Bible for prescribing slavery, they can't. It's impossible. It's patently impossible. First of all, these laws were not comprehensive, exhaustive laws like we have today. They're not meant to be regulatory. They're not meant to be legislative. It's not exhaustive law, folks. This is called paradigmatic law. So what does that mean? Well, paradigm, there's a paradigm example, like loving your neighbor, loving God. All laws flow through those two laws, or even three, like loving your neighbor, loving God, loving whoever's out there else, even loving your enemy. So this whole debate is over before it even started when it comes to scholarship. Ezra did not view written law as binding prescriptive. This is all the way into Ezra. There's no legislation, there's no prescriptive law, there's no normative laws except the 10 Commandments, which we'll get into in a second. But anyway, the 10 Commandments reflect anyway loving your neighbor and loving God anyway. So if either way how you want to say it, is all laws flowed through the 10 Commandments, or all laws flowed through the two laws, loving God and loving neighbor. It's the same thing anyway. So the first 4 laws would be loving God. The last 6 laws are loving your neighbor in the 10 Commandments. But the 10 Commandments are not casuistic law. They are apodictic law, and that's why they are prescriptive, normative. So the only laws that we know for the shadow of a doubt are the 10 Commandments. So Ezra didn't even have, even to the book of Ezra, there was no normative, regulatory, prescriptive laws. And continues, he used inside of the Torah as a preeminent description of Yahwistic ideals as practiced by Moses. Yet he freely applied Torah's ideals without obligation to Torah's stipulations. In other words, Ezra used the Pentateuch as a descriptive law collection, not prescriptions to be enforced. Excuse me. But anyway, that includes also the death penalty laws. There's absolutely no court cases in the ancient Near East of the Hebrews doing death penalties. So they're not legislative. In fact, that's a whole nother route, or a whole nother stream to go down to, is even death penalty laws. How are we even supposed to even understand death penalty laws in the Torah? So there you go, Mike. That's Michael Lefebvre. I just wanted to set the stage of this tonight. There is no such thing as prescriptive law. There's no such thing as condoning laws or any of that stuff. because that's not even how the framework of the Torah is how it's supposed to be understood. So there we go. Just wanted to set that understanding before we get into the meat of the response here. Let's continue.
Let's see if I can just get to this here. Well, it doesn't really matter. So you guys get the idea, the difference here. I don't have to read through all this for the sake of time, but prescription is what we're looking for here. So prescription often coming from authority, describing norms, rules, or standards to guide behavior. That is what we are focusing on tonight. The behavior that we are focusing on here is going to be found in Leviticus. We'll start there. So in Leviticus, the verse here we're talking about, and why did it do that? Oh no, that screws me up. Oh, this is gonna be a hassle. Okay, so shit. I wish that wouldn't have happened. It may not let me fuck. Well, okay. So property. Okay, good. So property. This is the word right here for the male and female.
I don't know if Jill had my book, but akuzah. So property. The word in Leviticus 25:46 is the word akuzah, possession in the KJV. I'm KJV, but yeah. So there was so many things that I think Jill could have tacked on here. Number one is God is the exemplar. He is the overarching example of akuzah, of property. God himself. But I'll show what I mean here in a second. So I'll let him keep going here.
Slaves, them you may acquire because they are your property. In the past, my opponent has tried to infer that when it says property in the Bible regarding your male and female slaves, that this is in verse 45 we're talking about, that they're referring to the foreigner, and that you may pass them off as an inheritance because they are your property. And he has said that property has held a different context than it does today. And that can be true in certain instances, but what we have to do is actually look at the usage and the context. So this specific use of property in the Hebrew, there are 58, you'll see right here, 58 total references throughout the Bible using the same exact Hebrew. The grammar is always as a possession of a material object. I researched all 58 usages: possession, 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 possession. This is talking about land, articles of clothing, silver, lives.
With all due respect, this guy has no idea what the hell he's talking about. With all due respect, I'm going to prove that. He absolutely is clueless. There was an actual paper that I'm going to cite here in a second that dealt with all of the Pentateuch, and not only the Pentateuch, the Tanakh itself, with the examples of property language. And I can't believe, hopefully Jill, I thought that Jill would have my book, but he could have cited that. I'm going to show, this is why I'm doing the response stream, to actually show the paper that was put out on property language. So anyways, continue.
Stock, cattle, again, mostly about land. So it is a material possession. It is absolutely, by definition, dehumanizing to refer to a human being as a material possession. Okay, that is a fact. That is how.
And it's a fact that you have no idea what you're talking about, because Yahweh himself is akuzah. Let's just jump into it. Let me show you guys, whoever's watching out there that watches this review. So, I mean, you couldn't get any more ignorant than this guy. It's, and not to bash him, because he probably got his information from the liberal scholarship, whatever, but it's still very ignorant. Let's go to Ezekiel 44:28. This is Yahweh speaking. Pay attention to what he says here. This will be their inheritance. This is exactly, almost verbatim of Leviticus 25:46. So I will be their neklah. That's what it is in the Hebrew, inheritance. I am their inheritance. And you must give them no acquisa. You must give them no property in Israel. I am their property. I am their acquisa. So if acquisa had a nefarious, if acquisa was nefarious in some way, the term, if the term was supposed to be understood in a dark context like chattel, then this guy would be claiming Yahweh is the chattel of Israel. You know how stupid that is? How could the God of Israel, Yahweh, be chattel of Israel? So hopefully, people wake up to this, to the Bible. Don't let these goofballs out there that think they're going to try to impugn Yahweh and make the Bible look bad. They have no clue what the hell is going on scripturally. Read it yourself, Ezekiel 44:28. Even go to interlinear. Go to BibleHub.com. You can go to different ones out there that have interlinears, and even look it up yourself. It's Acquizah. Yahweh is Acquizah. But it's even worse, though, because J.A. Battle put a whole paper out on property language. I'm going to pull that up right now. And this is in my book. But I mean, Jill has this style, so I'm not mad at Jill per se, but it's unfortunate that this information is not out there. So hopefully, I'm going to try to make it big on the screen. So that this is straight from J.A. Battles, an excerpt from his book. I mean, the source that, I mean, it was a part of a peer review paper. But the following table summarizes these findings, showing which definition of property are the most significant for each Hebrew term, and in turn, which terms most precisely describe each property concept. So J.A. Battle was part of his specialized research of property language used throughout the Hebrew Bible. Notice how acquisa property doesn't qualify for movable property slaves or hostile people possessed. So this is from, the paper was in 2008. The title of the paper is called Property Rights and Responsibilities in the Old Testament, in Journal 15.1.3. So you look at, there's Nakala, there's Shalek, there's Chalka, there's Acquisa, which we're talking about, there's Osher, there's Rakush, there's Yarusha, there's Yarushha, there's Morashah, there's Mikna, there's Kinyan, there's Yithron, there's Yithra, Segula, and Nakasim. Those are the property, the words for property used throughout the whole Tanakh. But notice how if you go under Acquisa, you have the number code over here for movable property or people possessed, including slaves. So if Acquisa is understood to be chattel, we would see number 3 there. So let's go under Acquisa and look at number 3. Oh my gosh, look, there's nothing there. That means it doesn't qualify as chattel. So Acquisa absolutely has nothing to do with chattel. In fact, Acquisa is economic output. This was also put up by Jay Sklar. It was kind of funny because in this debate, Jill called it Jay Schuyler. It's Chase Sklar, Jill. Sklar, not Skylar. Like, come on, man. That was so funny, though. But acquisite does not come under movable property slaves. We actually have, actual ancient Near East experts that understand the Hebrew language. And it's not. They make this up. First of all, Yahweh in Ezekiel 44 is called acquisite. Are these atheists, these skeptics saying that Yahweh is the chattel of Israel? How stupid would that be? It's patently impossible. So no, it doesn't mean slavery here, the word acquisite. It's economic output. I think even Jacob Milgram even said that as well in his source. It's funny how this guy mentioned Jacob Milgram, but actually Jacob Milgram cites the exact opposite of what this guy was claiming in Leviticus 25:46 with the word acquisite. But there's so much more in my book that I put out with Leviticus 25:46, but there it is. Like, we have an actual paper citation of property language in the Tanakh. So no, it's absolutely, these guys are clueless. They don't, and they claim they have scholarship on their side, but no, they don't. They just don't. They're outclassed. Let's see what's up. There we go. Let's pull it back up here.
How we think of things ethically in today's world, which is why slavery has been abolished. People are not property. And it means the same thing today in this regard as it did back in the...
And no, like, he doesn't even get this right either. So animals were kept as movable property under Baals, not Adon. So the word master in the Pentateuch is Adon. But there's another word that is used for actual chattel that there really were animals were actually referred to as chattel under Baals. So there's two words for Lord. The word Lord, or it's not even master, but it means Lord or overseer or something like that. So he didn't even get that right either. And especially in the book of Exodus, we can look at how Baals were the ones that moved, like the cows or bulls or whatever, and they would have to be that the property would have to be returned back to the master, and that's why it is chattel. That's why animals were chattel. But I mean, are they really going to go at the Bible now because the Bible talks about bulls and cows being chattel? So I don't think so. Good luck with that one.
Biblical slavery time. Okay, so let me go out of that. We'll just leave that up there for your sake. I don't think you need to see all this. Okay. Is that showing? Well, whatever. So the manual on how to own slaves. This is the conclusion that you will reach after tonight's debate. Yes, we are talking about the Bible. The contents within include the guide on how to get away with beating the hell out of your slave, the groups of people that you can own as property.
And this was another incredibly misrepresented, distorted falsehood that he claimed that you could beat the slave as much as you want as long as they were not killed. And that's just total garbage. I mean, Christopher Wright wrote a whole in his book a whole excerpt on debunking that, and I'll explain. Continue on. I'll let him continue.
Property and pass off as inheritance. How to procure some concubines. Let's get into the data and find out if the Bible condones slavery. Slavery. God tells you that you can own people as property for life and pass them off as an inheritance to your children because
there is no such thing. See, here's the thing too. The word olam. There really wasn't any congruent language that means life. There is none. And in my book, I show how the Jews understood olam when it comes to servitude or service to mean to the 50th year jubilee or when the master dies. See, that's proper scholarship. There is no such thing as life. Like, what is that? Can he cite references where the word olam is used for a life of a Hebrew or something? That's ridiculous. The word olam was properly defined as the death of the master or the 50th year of the jubilee. So that's just patently false again. It's just a terrible blunder of scholarship here, and I would wipe the floor at this guy. He's going to be embarrassed because really, like, this is pathetic. He's just selling you guys false information. And he gets it from the Josh Bowens of the world. He gets it from Justin. He gets it from Dan McClellan. He's just parroting false information.
They are your property. Reference Leviticus 25, 44 through 46. I just gave you the definition of property as a material possession in the same sense that a piece of land.
Is Yahweh material possession? Obviously not. He's an immaterial being. He's a spirit. How does that even work?
A piece of livestock or an article of clothing, silver, money, etc. Beating your slave to death. If you want to beat your slave to death, all you need to do is make sure that you don't knock out any of his teeth.
And you're totally clueless he doesn't understand figures of speech. Even Josh Bowen wrote in his book, he's written several things. I'm going to cite Josh Bowen on this, that eye for an eye. They didn't really see, there's no court documents saying that if someone poked out someone's eye, that their eye would be taken out. And it's called lex talionis. Lex talionis is not exact language. You're not supposed to take it as exact language. And this is partly what casuistic law is. He doesn't even understand what casuistic law is. Lex talionis is not supposed to be understood as literal language. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, bruise for a bruise, life for a life. He didn't even mention that part. So if a slave, here's the thing, the law applies to all people. There's one law. I'm glad Jill brought that up. He did a good job at that. There's not two distinct laws, one for the foreigner, one for the Jew. That's just no such thing. It says the opposite. Leviticus 24 makes it clear there's one law for the Jew and the Gentile, the foreigner that's in their land. So in Exodus 21, where it says if a master pokes out the eye or a tooth, they're not only released from their contractual obligation, they could poke out or take out the tooth of their master. It's called lex talionis. Let me show you guys in a second. I'll show you. I'll explain here.
They don't die within the first 48 hours. Reference Exodus 21, 20 through 21. Slavery was never condemned, not in the Old Testament or the New Testament. The New Testament's most prolific writer, Paul tells slaves.
See, that's not even how paradigmatic. So there's not supposed to be specificities when it comes to paradigmatic law. It automatically comes doing ill to your neighbor. Loving your neighbor, it says by Paul, that brings no ill will to your neighbor or anything ill to your neighbor. So that would include rape, that would include enslavement, that would include anything that is ill to your neighbor, brings ill to your neighbor. That's the intention of the law. The law is not a rule book. It's not supposed to be looked as a rule book. It never was. Even the Jews understand the Torah is supposed to be understood in a wisdomic sense. So come on, man, this is terrible, 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 terrible. And I would gladly expose this guy. Does he really want to take me on? Do you really want to take me on, Objective Ethics? Do you really want to? I hope you do. I want to. So I can hopefully bring illumination to the world, to the people that are confused about this.
To obey their masters with a sincere heart, just as they would obey Christ. Ephesians 6:5. He also tells slaves to obey their masters with fear.
And he doesn't even get this right either with New Testament slavery. The overwhelming consensus, as I put in my book, has nothing to do with Jewish slavery. It's Roman slavery, you idiot! When Paul says to be faithful to your master, he's talking about a Roman master, not a Jew. The Jews weren't enslaving themselves because the Romans were enslaving them. How does that even make any sense? In Jerusalem, it was Rome who had the power over the Jews, not the Jews over the Jews. You couldn't make this up. This is terrible. Hence is why I'm doing this response. This guy's a total fraud. Liberal scholarship is fraudulent. It's a lie. It's a joke. He didn't even get the category right. He can't even get Roman slavery correct.
Fear and trembling, Colossians 3:22. We know that Jesus was a Jew who practiced and promoted the 613 Mosaic laws, which of course prescribe slavery.
Yo, P, good to see you, buddy. What's up? We're just reviewing a debate by Jill about supposed biblical slavery. And this guy is just, how many falsehoods and misinformation this guy's trying to pass off is ridiculous. It's sickening.
According to scholarship, we're going to cite Haas, 2003, page 778. Slavery is a condition acknowledged in the Pentateuch in which a person is deprived of freedom, at least for a period of time, by being in subjugation to a master in order that the master...
Subjugation? What the... Where do you get that? Citation, please.
...may benefit from the...
I mean, there was actually an Oriental Institute seminar, which was the very, very top ancient Near East scholars talking about this issue. It was an overwhelming, it's in my book. These are not quote mines. You can look it up yourself. In the Oriental Institute seminar, they demonstrate there was no such thing as chattel slavery. They all ruled that. That was the overwhelming consensus view in the seminar. Are you smarter than those people? Objective ethics. Josh Bowen couldn't even hold a candle to these people. Is this where you're getting your garbage from? Garbage in, garbage out? You think Josh Bowen's a legitimate source? What a joke.
labor of the slave. Slavery may be involuntary, in which case the slave is generally considered the property of the owner, and as such may be bought and sold. In Pentateuchal legislation, involuntary permanent slavery applies only to non-Israelites.
There was no such thing. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to let him continue because I'm going to show him how incompetent this guy is, not only with scholarship, but this Bible period.
Slavery may also be voluntary for Israelites, such as when they agree to work for fellow Israelites for a limited period of time to pay off debts or to survive poverty or destitution. This voluntary slavery, we often think of it as indentured servitude, is often what Christians will almost always, when they get into the slavery debate, will obfuscate and say, no, there was no chattel.
That is pretty much the conclusive view in the Oriental seminar.
Slavery in the Bible, it was all in.
It was Laura Culbertson, and like she was the whole one who the main operator of the Oriental Institute was Laura Culbertson, and she had a whole article out on this. Like, this guy should be up to date on this scholarship, man. There's just no excuse for this. But also, Jill, like, really, I mean, come on, Jill, we got to get you got to be able to give citations better. But I understand your angle too. You come from it at a whole different angle than I do, so I don't want to criticize Jill too much. But I guess what I would say is I would have just slaughtered this guy. I mean, he would have just been put out quickly, just like quick and swift.
Indentured servitude, and it was all contractual. That is a lie. The only indentured contractual servitude that we find in the Old Testament slavery laws, this Old Testament slavery prescriptions, are about foreigners, the foreigners are not does not apply to foreigners. Excuse me. It only applies.
And also, I would like to challenge this guy. What do you mean foreigner? You mean illegal? Are you talking in a legalistic sense? There was no such thing as a legal distinction. In fact, let me pull it up really quick. You know, like this is just ignorance and just obliviousness to real scholarship out there. So, quote, there is no evidence that such different kinds of identity, ethnic, had also a bearing of the legal status of persons. So, also, it says, it is now widely, though universally agreed, that the word Hebrew is linked to the word Apiru, which is found in a wide range of Mesopotamian, Egyptian texts, a term described as certain social stratum common throughout the ancient Near East, namely a class of landless people. So it's a social, it's an economic status, not a social status. There is no such thing. There's no social distinctions in the ancient Near East. Let's see. There's more, though. There are very few legal rules recorded that distinguish between citizens and non-citizens. So this guy is parroting something that's not even relevant. It's not true. It's a lie. The most important were provisions for the relief of debt and debt slavery, and for the protection of debt slaves or pledges from the further abuse. Where do we go here? Further abuse, blah, blah, blah. Okay, these social justice measures found... Where did I lost? Okay, yeah, these social justice measures found in a number of systems often limited their benefits exclusively to citizens. Another possible area of distinction was in landholding. In some systems, there are indications that foreigners needed permission of the ruling authorities in order to acquire land estates. Quote, ethnic divisions, with few exceptions, played no role in ancient Mesopotamia. Many ethnic groups entered Mesopotamia and all eventually assimilated. Even former Assyrian enemies who resided in the cities ruled by their conquerors and were treated as equals. They were never called barbarians, Asiatics, no other derogatory names, as corroborated by Neo-Assyrian royal inscriptions. So this guy doesn't know crap. He's clueless. Unbelievable. And this is by Westbrook. He quoted Westbrook in this debate, this guy. Freedom in the ancient Near East was a relative, not an absolute state, as the ambiguity of the term slave in all the region's languages illustrates. Slave could be used to refer to a subordinate in the social ladder. Thus, the subjects of a king were called his slaves, even though they were free citizens. Huh. Do I have to repeat that again? Slave could be used to refer to a subordinate in the social ladder. Thus, the subject of a king were called his slaves, even though they were free citizens. The king himself, if a vassal, was the slave of the emperor. A king was even referred to as a slave. Are you saying that the king was a chattel slave? How stupid you must be to buy that bullshit. This is from Westbrook, the same person who he cited in the debate. Oh, see, I think it's fun for me just to blast on people. I love this, just to expose their fraudulent bullshit. The king himself, if a vassal, was the slave of the emperor. Kings, emperors, and commoners alike were slaves of the gods. So are you saying that that the kings and emperors were actual chattel slaves? Come on, man. Even a social inferior, when addressing a social superior, referred to himself out of politeness as your slave. There were, moreover, a plethora of servile conditions that were not regarded as slavery, such as a son, such as a daughter, such as a wife, serf, or human pledge, end quote. Here's another term. Ethnicity is a term that describes social relationships structured around differences that are based and are communicated by commonly accepted markers of such differentiation, distinguishing ethnicity from other types of social identity, class, gender, interest groups, and race. For example, are several important characteristics. One is an idea or myth of common descent or origin. In other words, actual biological descent is not important, but rather a social constructed discourse of such descent. What is this about foreigners again? Atheists? There is no such distinction that you claim there is. Quote, indeed, it is hard for us to even evaluate ethnicity as a category. Although certain ethnic terms survive in text, their referent and context of use are unclear. They do not appear to be particularly significant in social life. Even the categories that are salient in the ancient Near East, such as citizenship or tribal affiliation, do not correspond with larger political realities. There is no pan-ethnic identity or language that can give rise to cohesive collection identity like nationalism. So much for there being a bias to non-Israelites. Garbage. Quote, ethnic divisions play little part in the major ancient Near Eastern societies. This is very clear from Mesopotamia. The third millennium knew no split on racial lines between the speakers of different languages, and no such split developed later. So there is no split. There's not this Jew and then this terrible Gentile people, whatever the fuck that means. So I think I proved my point. This guy is a clown. I'm saying to this guy here, you're an idiot. Objective ethics. You just parrot whatever you are fed from some other idiot. Let's move on.
To fellow Israelites, such as when they agreed to work for fellow Israelites for a limited period of time to pay off debts or survive poverty or destitution. But because God brought the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt to serve him alone as master, they are forbidden to bring fellow Israelites into a condition of permanent slavery, as was the case in the rest of the ancient Near East. Permanent slavery is permitted only for a Gentile in subject.
There is no such thing as permanent slavery. You have to prove that with the word olam. You're going to have to demonstrate that.
To a Hebrew. The Israelites' identity as people redeemed from slavery has
again, there's citation in my book. Olam did not mean permanent. It didn't mean forever. In fact, the word olam, when it's used for permanent or in the philosophical sense of unending, only applied to God himself. God is olam. So no, that's just factually wrong again.
Direct implications for the forms of slavery that existed in Israel and their treatment of their slaves, both Gentile chattel slaves and Hebrew bond servants. Next, I just want to go over a couple of citations. So what we are doing here, and when we compare the ancient Near East, the slavery laws from other nations compared to what we find in the Hebrew Bible, we'll use Westbrook's research from 2003, page 9.
That's funny because I just cited Westbrook to show what a clown this guy is. Let's see if his Westbrook quote actually fits.
While many of us are more familiar with these law codes, they are certainly not the only sources of legal information. I will discuss the sources here, but we'll return to some of them in the remainder of this book. Westbrook lists several types of textual sources: royal decrees and instructions to individuals, trial records, law codes, lexical texts, which contain legal vocabulary, transactional records, letters, historiographical documents, and literature. We will be looking at comparatively the laws of Ur-Nama, the laws of Lipit Ishtar, the laws of Eshnunna, the laws of Hammurabi, Middle Assyrian laws, Hittite laws, and Neo-Babylonian laws. This is what we're comparing biblical slavery to. This is not comparing biblical slavery to the slavery in the antebellum South.
What would you even compare those? Because if you actually understood even the beginning book of Genesis, it's a polemic to the other religions. The writers put purposeful polemics in the Pentateuch to separate Israel from the other religions. It looks like that's another thing you're clueless about.
So that is a non sequitur. Debt slaves were free. Here we'll cite Westbrook from 2003b, page 380. Westbrook distinguishes between debt and chattel slavery in this way. Debt slaves were free persons who had entered slavery by
Did you know Westbrook in that same book, and I think it's 4.5.2. I'll have to pull it up. But in his definition of chattel, he put free. They had it means volunteer, that they could volunteer. So how do you volunteer to be a chattel slave? That's by Westbrook. You're gonna have to square that circle.
Reason of a debt. They were alienable, but their slavery was conditional upon the existence of the debt and would be terminated with its extinction for whatever reason. Chattel slaves were slaves who had entered slavery on any other basis and whose slavery was in theory permanent and unconditional. In Leviticus 25.
Oh, so I guess because Westbrook says it, therefore that trumps all other scholarship in the ancient Near East. Really? I mean, I cited Westbrook where he said the exact opposite, that even kings, emperors were called slaves, and he said that there was really no such thing as a slave. So I think Westbrook contradicts himself. I wouldn't even use him as a source.
You want to go through that? Yes, in Leviticus 25, 44 to 46, the very same passage that I cited with the word property and cited its usage as a material possession, which stands.
Again, you're gonna have to show how Yahweh is a material possession. Then Ezekiel 44:28 is ridiculous.
In direct contrast to the laws concerning Hebrew debt slaves, we see that foreigners from the surrounding nations, as well as those who are sojourners in the land of Israel, can be purchased as chattel slaves. Your male.
All right, so I wanted to show this real quick because I said I was going to do it in Exodus 21, and then I'm going to come back to Leviticus. So Jill did mention this, that if the master murdered his servant, that they would be its death penalty. It's actually in the Hebrew, it's punish, that they would be surely die the deaths or surely be punished. It's when you have a double usage of it in the Hebrew, I'll show you guys. Surely shall be punished. You get the let's see here. Yeah, so you have the double uses right here. It's H558 Nakam, double Nakam. So it's like it's called an infinite absolute in the Hebrew. It means it's a declaration that they would die. It's like the strongest form of death penalty you can get. So what does this show? It shows us that that aveds, that's the proper usage, is called aved. And an aved had the same equality as a freeborn citizen. So the same value. So they're already that refutes this idea of chattel slavery, that the chattel slaves had less value than the free citizens. That's total bullshit, because right here it says that if the master murdered the aved, that the death penalty would be enacted. Period. End of story. Full stop. That's it. Oh, but now you're going to say, oh, notwithstanding he continues a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his money. So you ever heard of something called due process? It wasn't because that, some guy that just got the shit beat out of him, that the master would give him 2 days to recuperate. Because think about this. You can talk to people who, like, the general population who plays basketball on the blacktop. They get their ankle sprained, they're out for months. It doesn't make any sense. Like, if you beat someone to within an inch of their life, 2 days ain't gonna do it. So no, this is talking about due process. This is a judicial declaration. And this is, I'm in my book, I actually give a citation here. So this is a rhetorical device to get as many witnesses as possible. 2 witnesses for 2 days. It could be all the way up. Doesn't matter how many days it is. There needs to be witnesses, because 2 witnesses declare a matter. So a matter is established by 2 or more witnesses. So the days is to get as many witnesses as possible. If you say that the master was unfair, in some way, what's the word I'm looking for here? Unfairly treating his a servant. Yeah. I mean, this is something judicial. This isn't like saying, "Oh, you can beat the shit out of your slave." Well, let me prove that anyway. So it goes now to the fruit depart from her, talking about abortion there, or not abortion, but someone losing their child through a fight. So this is like a hypothetical scenario. But look what it says in verse 23, literally 2 verses down. And if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life. This is called lex talionis. Lex talionis was the overarching principle, wisdom of the Israel during that time. So eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, foot for a foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. What is this telling us? Well, it's telling you that if the master unfairly beat his slave, the slave could fairly beat the master back. So if let's just like an example, let's say the master slapped the shit out of his slave. The slave could slap the shit back of the master. It doesn't make any sense too. Like, for there to be chattel slavery, there has to be gangs of people, gangs of masters. You don't have one master. That's stupid. That's not even realistic. So one measly Hebrew is going to control a house of slaves and slap them around and beat them? Are you serious? What reality are you living in? Atheists, agnostics, whatever the hell you are idiotic and stupid. One master is not going to control a house of people. It's retarded. It's actually retarded to believe that. So the slave had his own freedoms, his own laws where he could fight back. It's called lex talionis. But even moreover, if he does any unwarranted abuse at all, as I'm going to show you with Christopher Wright, so whenever they mention the tooth or they mention the eye, they're not being specific here. That's not how paradigmatic law works. They're giving examples of all, like they're trying to frame it within a category, a class of unwarranted assault. It's not trying to be specific here. None of these laws are specific. That's case law. Casuistic law is case law. So they're generalities. You got to understand how even case law works. This guy doesn't understand case law either. It's just ignorance, unbound ignorance, man. It's terrible. This is terrible how they like to parrot bullshit and lies, falsehoods. let me show up Christopher Wright here. Like, I'm gonna get scholarship on it. Like, this is terrible blunders. So here it is. Quote, so notice the quote below by ancient Near East scholar Christopher Wright. He points out that damaging a tooth and an eye are emblematic of any unwarranted assault, period. Then he makes the distinction between the humanity of the slave and the financial value of the servant. We must define terms better because property can be misleading. So, quote, this is what Christopher Wright says. The inclusion of the tooth indicates that the law does not intend only grievous bodily harm, but any unwarranted assault. The basic humanity of the slave is given precedence over his property status. Christopher Wright makes another important characterization regarding the legal status of slaves. They too, like anyone else, had legal rights, which included the right to take their master to court if they were wronged, including abuse. Quote, the law, if it were to have any meaningful legal as distinct from merely charitable force, must presuppose that there were some circumstances in which a slave could appeal to judicial authority against his own master, that in some situations a slave could have definite legal status as a person, notwithstanding his normal status as purchased property. And I think Jill did a great job too in the debate explaining what we mean by kisef, like his money. So it's purely economic, financial. That's all it is. This is financial language. Jay Sklar does a good job of that. I'm thinking in my book, there's a bunch of other citations I have too demonstrating that as well. I think Gregory Chirchigano is another good source on this. So yeah, another L taken to the skeptic. Another L. So yeah. So the slave had, I hate calling him slave, but I'm just going to say, okay, the Aved had lex talionis. If the master hit him in the face, he could hit him back in the face. If he was beat, he could beat the master. But also he could take it to court and also get out of his contract. He would automatically be released out of his contract as well. So there you go. Let's continue.
Female slaves are to come from the nations around you. This is Leviticus 25:44-46, New International Version. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living.
Also, I never heard anyone ever respond to what I said about one master controlling a house of slaves. How does that, is that even realistic? We even have runaway slaves with gangs. Think about this. There's numerous attestation in the ancient Near East of runaway slaves from these nations who did chattel slavery, who had gangs of masters. But they're not going to run away from one Hebrew master? What? What are you smoking?
Among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. So what we see there is we see the distinction. So context matters. How do we know these are chattel slaves, and how do we know there's a difference between chattel slavery and indentured servitude? It tells us right there. You must not rule over your fellow Israelites, and it says, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites.
Yeah, and that's also a fallacy. First of all, it's a argument from silence, because just because it doesn't mention that the foreigner should not or shouldn't be treated ruthlessly doesn't automatically mean that they are to be treated ruthlessly. It actually has to say that, stipulate that. It actually has to. It doesn't follow. There's numerous fallacies there. First of all, it's an argument from silence. It's also a non sequitur, that just because it mentions to not ruthlessly treat an Israelite doesn't automatically mean that the foreigner is supposed to be treated ruthlessly. And we have numerous texts where it refutes that anyway. So let me pull up a couple passages just to set that straight. Let's go to Leviticus 19:34. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. So we know these people were not born among the Israelites, so they are not Israelites. And thou shalt love him as thyself, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So just as Israel were foreigners to Egypt, the ones who were foreign to Israel, that's how God is. He's distinguishing two people groups here. I hope people see that. So he's saying he's actually using a utilitarian ethic here. This is utilitarianism, which is pretty good. I mean, people like atheists, even this guy is called objective ethics. Like, he should understand a utilitarian view here is how Yahweh's operating to explain an ethic. He's saying, because you know what it feels like. You Israelites know what it feels like to be a chattel slave in Egypt. You know what it feels like. The suffering you went through, right? This is what it's talking about. Yahweh's actually bringing utilitarian ethic here. He's saying that you Israelites know what it feels like to be oppressed and enslaved. So don't do it to the people who are foreigners to you. He's saying love your neighbor. And this is why we can even use the Old Testament to prove that the two overarching principles, paradigmatic law, is loving God and loving your neighbor. All laws flow through those two laws, period. We see it here in the Old Testament. It's right there, Leviticus 19:34. But we also have others. Quote, thou shalt neither vex a stranger nor oppress him. End of slavery right there. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. You were foreigners in the land of Egypt. That's just debunk slavery right there. There is no distinction between an Israelite and a foreigner. There's no separate laws. And let me just debunk that anyway. Let's go to Leviticus 24. Ye shall have one manner of law, as well for the stranger as for one of your own country, for I am the Lord your God. So there was one law that was applicable to the Jews and the foreigners alike. There was no separate laws. Total bullshit, lies, misinformation. Absolutely not true. Total malarkey, nonsense, falsehoods, lies. And look what it says. As for one of your own country, how you operate the law for your own people, also treat them the same way, the same laws, how you treat your own Israelites. Pretty clear. Is there anything unclear about that? Leviticus 24:22. Unbelievable. I think Jill did bring that up, though. Anyway.
Israelites ruthlessly. The assumption here is that the alien is a chattel slave, not a debt slave. This is confirmed by the verb quana, purchase. A non-Israelite chattel slave is defined as a mikna kesef, purchased. You see this.
Yeah. Kesef is a financial unit, measure of a financial unit in the ancient Near East. It's in my book by Gregory Shergano. You're going to say Gregory Shergano isn't good enough for you? Then you're a clown. If you think that. I think it's hard to say his name. Chagano.
All throughout the Bible, Genesis 17, 12 to 13, 23, 27, Exodus 12, 44, or simply as kasapo, his property, Exodus 21, 21, and again in the verse we cited there in Leviticus. Slaves could not only be purchased, but they could also be born into slavery, as we will see in a later chapter. Exodus 21, 4 describes children born to a slave who remain the property of the master. Other passages speak of
no, and again, this is a whole nother butchered blunder of a text. In Exodus 21:4, it's talking about provision. So you can't just yoke yourself to a master and then parasite off of your master. There's going to have to be provisional cost for that. Douglas Stewart actually has a whole thing on that. I guess, you know what? Maybe we should go to Douglas Stewart. It's so terrible. This is so terrible blunders. Douglas Stewart is a PhD Old Testament scholar. Like, I don't know what else to tell these people, man. Like, terrible, terrible. So let's just explain what he's talking about. He's claiming you can be born into slavery, which is total horseshit because he doesn't understand how economics work. It's almost communism too, socialism, communism, what he's trying to impose here. So firstly, Exodus 21:4 does not state that the children and wife were the masters in perpetuity, nor do the texts mention that they were the masters beyond a legal sense. In the Tanakh, masters were more like investors. So let me repeat that. Masters were more like investors rather than traditional slave masters. Abraham in Genesis 17, 23, 27 is a great example of Eleazar. And Jill did talk about Abraham and Eleazar, which is a great job there. It's Jill. Spot on there. In this case, the male Aved servant who was provided with a wife and children by the master had the option to use them as collateral if he wanted to exit a loan from the contractual obligation. Quote, when a free man gave a wife to another man who owed him something, certain conditions applied to that marriage. The man in the inferior position was often a pledge, one who worked as a servant, not a slave, and whose services functioned as security or collateral for a debt that was owed, or a debt slave, as in Exodus. Typically, the pledge or the debt slave could take his wife and any children she had born to him only by satisfying particular requirements. Let's continue. So Douglas Stewart points out that the biblical marriages in ancient times were different from modern times. And this is, again, presentism. It's a ethnocentric viewpoint the atheists have. They're looking down on an ancient culture with their modern culture. Terrible, disgusting. You people are doing that. More importantly, a significant business ethic had to be dealt with when a master provided a wife and children. It was necessary to compensate the master for services rendered and associated costs. So, I mean, so this atheist or agnostic expects the master to just be used and abused like that? Really? By way of background, we note that all marriages in the ancient Israel were arranged. Someone sold the bride to the groom for a bride price. No dowry system existed. So the only payments went entirely to the bride's family. And this is another thing he doesn't understand in the debate. This atheist is something called a mohar. He doesn't even understand what a mohar is. They were gifts to the bride and the family. So in other words, I don't want to read it's if a woman were treated already the contract service, her boss owned the rights to make arrangement for her marriage and to negotiate for her bride price, which was paid to him as an employer. In other words, the family of her boss was now her family for purposes of marriage negotiation. With these factors in mind, the provisions of verses 3 through 4 set the rules as follows. If an already married servant contracted for the usual 6-year term of service, that servant should have built into the contract some provisions for the keeping of a spouse, i.e. the boss had to figure the cost of housing, food, clothing for the spouse. So the master provided food, clothing, and housing for the one who wanted a spouse from the master. So how is the master going to be paid back? Oh, that's right. By labors and doing things for the master. This is how disgusting atheism is, folks, right here, because they expect the master to be used and abused. And to be to have someone leech off of them. So the master is supposed to be leeched on? Are you serious? He's the one providing food, house, and provisions for the other ones. You can't exploit the master like that. That's ridiculous. No business does that. There's no business ethic to this at all through the atheist view. No, they didn't think about that, did they? They just assume slavery. The God of the Old Testament's evil. Ooh. Good to see you there. Believe on the Lord. You can't just leech off your master like that, because he's the one providing the house, food, and clothing, etc. Unbelievable. So no one's born into fucking slavery, you atheist tits. Gosh, it pisses me off. The lies. The stigmatization of something that was good, righteous, just.
Of house-born slaves as one born of the house, Yelid Bayat. In Leviticus 22:10-11, we read, this is regarding a priest slave. So no one outside a priest family may eat the sacred offering, nor may the guest of a priest or his hired worker eat it. But if a priest buys a slave with money, or if slaves are born in his household, they may eat his food. This is not a gift to the slave.
Are you saying Eleazar Eleazar was born to the house of Abraham? Are you saying Eleazar was famished or he was mistreated? And he still don't even understand. And this is what Jill brought up in this debate, that this is adoption through manumission. I'm sorry, manumission through adoption, which was an ancient Near East practice. It was a huge practice. And so here's what happened. So there's to put this and try to simplify it down. You had landless, and you also had famished or famine events out there that were so far in debt that they couldn't be reconciled or consolidated. There was no way to consolidate their debt. So the only option they had was go to a court where they would be legally adopted by a master. And this is where the cluelessness comes into it, that the one who would be adopted through the courts would be freed from their debt when the master died, or the 50th year, called the Jubilee. That's when they would be released. But it doesn't even stop there, though. The ones who were adopted, we call them famine slaves, or the landless slaves, or the ones that were caravaneers, the ones that were isolated, that were, maybe they got separated from some other group or something. They're isolated somewhere. So the only way they could basically have a chance is go through the legal process of adoption. And not only were they being taken care of, they would inherit the master's house and goods, like Eleazar. We have an example of that. Eleazar is a documented adoption example. Numerous scholars talk about that. Eleazar is a non-Israelite. He's a foreigner. Period. And we also have other examples of Ruth the Moabite. Ruth, see, here's the thing. In Leviticus 25 is talking about ransoming a foreigner. So ransoming a foreigner was a way of redemption. So this whole thing, that Leviticus 25 is about redeeming foreigners, not enslaving them. As Ruth the Moabite was redeemed. So redemption, Leviticus 25 is about redemption, not slavery. These idiots, they're so clueless, so fucking clueless, you people are.
Able to eat the sacred offering. This is not a good thing. The slave has to eat something or the slave will perish from malnutrition. Of course, the master is going to feed his slave.
One thing I liked what Jill brought up is that the ones who had farms and that had agriculture, they had to leave food for the foreigners. Great job, Jill. I mean, that was excellent. How Jill brought up that the actual farmers of Israel had to leave food for the foreigners. That's a great job.
We see slaves born into servitude in Genesis 17:12, as Jeremiah 2:4, the author of Ecclesiastes himself, boasts of his great wealth, which included slaves. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. Ecclesiastes 2:7. Mendelssohn, 1978, page 58. The Old Testament terminology corresponds to that in Mesopotamia. Yeled Bayat, houseborn slave, in distinction to Miknat Kesef, purchase.
It means attached to a household. There's nothing derogatory about it. In fact, I think he said Alex, but there's other quotes too. Let me pull a quote up here. There's nothing undignified about the term aved. Let me pull that up here. Quote, equality before the law of social groups included aliens and immigrants is made explicit in Exodus 12:49, Leviticus 19:34, Numbers 15:16. And let's get another one here. Here it is. Equality before the law of social groups, including aliens. Okay, that's what I just read. So, but there's also, let me find the other one because there's nothing undignified about the term Aved. Oh, here it is. Gosh. Quote, there is nothing inherently lowly or undignified about being in a bed. It's B in the English, but in the Hebrew, it's va. So it's a ved, but you can say in the English a ba. So either a bed or a ved indeed is an honorable, dignified term. This is from John Goldingay, Israel's Life 461. There you go. So this guy is, yeah, clueless, garbage in, garbage out.
Slave. Ben Bayet, son of the house, and Azne Bayet, people of the household or domestics. The later term includes both houseborn and purchased slaves, as is evident from Genesis 17:27, and all of the people of his house, born in the house and bought with silver. I will continue. We see, therefore, there were basically two types of slaves in the Old Testament, debt and chattel slaves.
No, there is no such thing. I'm going to prove this wrong patently again. Like you can't even claim that, because I'm going to demonstrate why. There can be, I'm going to put this way in a prescriptive sense. It ought not be the case that you could even claim chattel. It's to the most absolute possibility, the absolute sense that there cannot be chattel in the Bible, because I'm going to tell you why. Let's pull up the Bible, guys. I'm putting this in the most normative, prescriptive sense as you can get. This is in an absolute sense why chattel's impossible. And this is how disgusting and out of touch with the Bible and scholarship these people who try to impose slavery in the Old Testament are. It is disgusting how they try to push this narrative. So let me pull that up here. So let's go to Deuteronomy 10:14. We're going to go to Psalms 24:1 and then Leviticus 25:31. Let's go to Deuteronomy 10:14 first. This is the verse right here. Let's read it. Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's thy God, comma, the earth also, comma, with all that therein is. What is that telling us? That humans are God's possession, not humans. You cannot own other humans because God, Yahweh, already owns them. Him alone. Period. Let's go to Psalms 24:1 makes that clear. All right, let's pull up Psalms 24:1. Quote, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and its people belong to him. So, yes, it's impossible for another human to own another person as property because it only belongs to God. Humans belong to God. That's it. You can't own another human being because God does. God wouldn't even allow for that. That would even undermine his own deity, his own attributes, his own aseity. Sorry, there's no such thing as I hate to break it to these people. They don't know what they're talking about. They're clueless. But also, we're going to go to another verse here. Let's go to Leviticus 25:33. And if a man purchase of the Levites in the house that was sold in the city of his possession shall go out in the year of the Jubilee, for the houses of the cities of the Levites are their possession among the children of Israel. Oops, did I say 25, 23? Oops, I had the, gosh, dang it, I'm sorry. That was my bad. All right, this is Yahweh. This is Yahweh. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine, for ye are strangers and sojourners with me. So, why is that important? Because God owns all the possessions, all acquisa is his. There is no acquisa that is not the Lord's. And the people's as well. That's what the word there is. The land is a possession. That is the Lord's. The people are his possession. So I think I made it clear, guys. It can't be any more clear. Chattel slavery is patently impossible because that would even undermine God's own qualities and his own attributes, his nature. So no, humans just don't own other humans. You're just visitors in what he already owns. The peoples are his. So sorry, the Jews already knew this. The Jews already knew that God owned everything. So they're not practicing chattel slavery by convention. Or at least that's the principle. And another thing that kind of pissed me off is this guy brought up Jeremiah 34. Yeah, the Jews were enslaving their own people, but God's the one who is outrightly calling it out. Yahweh's actually calling it out. Let's go to Jeremiah 34. This is the biggest genetic fallacy you could possibly do. oh my gosh, there's slavery by the Jews. They enslave each other. But yes, God is the one who's reprimanding them. Quote, this is the verse starting in, I think, we'll start in verse 10. Now when all the princes and all the people which had entered in the covenant heard that everyone should let his manservant, you see how Yahweh's saying, this is what I laid out, that I'm outlawing slavery here. They're going against what he wants. And every one of his maidservant go free, that none should serve themselves of any more, that they obeyed and let them go. But afterward they turned and caused the servants and handmaids whom they had let go free to return and brought into subjection. And this is why we know that there is no slavery by God, Yahweh, in the Bible, because that word subjection would be used for the foreigners, and it's not used in the Pentateuch. This is one of the indicators that demonstrates that it's just debt servitude, not chattel slavery, because the Hebrews had a word for chattel slavery. It's kabosh. Nowhere did Yahweh say to kabosh foreigners. Nowhere. It means to subdue, force, keep under, bring into bondage. That, yes, is chattel slavery. Nowhere in the Pentateuch is kabosh used anywhere. So that is one factor where we know for a fact that there was no chattel slavery, because kabosh is not used. It's funny how his own people did chattel slavery to their own people, not the foreigners. Now, isn't that funny and ironic? Yahweh he's giving a diatribe, if you want to call it. He's calling him out, like he's saying, you what you're doing is you're going against what my law. What I'm trying to say is, like, what I prescribed, what I wanted, you're going against. So just think about that. All the idiots out there who think there's chattel slavery, we know what the word for chattel slavery is. It's kabosh. Not used anywhere in the Pentateuch for, the supposed foreigner slavery. It's stupid. And I'm going to debunk that anyway coming up here. Then we'll probably shut her down. But anyway.
This raises the
God is chiding Israel for doing what he wanted, what he originally wanted, is for people to be liberated and free. That's the God that we serve. And they kibosh their own people. So you think God controls people? Then that's sorry. I mean, right there also, Jill, since you're a Calvinist, like, are you saying that God predetermined his own people to enslave his own people? Come on, Jill, really? You got to get rid of this Calvinism, dude. Seriously. Anyway.
The obvious question: how did someone become a slave? There were several avenues to slavery. We have already established. I think for the sake of time, let me see if I can skip some of this here. We'll go here. Prop 2006, page 188. Persons mostly entered servitude due to economic distress, as we see in Leviticus 25:39, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Amos. Throughout the Near East, debt was the main cause of slavery. Other ways to become a slave were sale by parents. We see this in Exodus, Kings, Nehemiah. Also due to poverty, judicial sentence, Exodus 22. Kidnapping, Genesis 37:28, Exodus 21:16, Deuteronomy 24:7. And captured in war. We see this all throughout Genesis, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Samuel, Kings, Second Chronicles. There was also the Yeled Beat, houseborn, in the offsprings of slaves. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Jeremiah. After becoming a slave during the term of servitude, one was a chattel, much like domestic cattle. Genesis 12:16.
No, that's Baals, not Adons. In animals, and we know this, that chattel slavery is only relevant to animals because the animal would be returned back to the Baal. People were never returned back. Never. If a Hebrew left a master, they could go to another master anywhere. And we know this in Deuteronomy 23, I think it is, or 25. I think it's 25. Yeah, Deuteronomy 25.
2014, 2435, 3043, etc., etc. I own but still possess some of basic rights and the object of empathy, according to Job. One of the challenging. Very slow. Give me 1 second here. Apologize. Okay. Was slavery voluntary? And I'll just close up here. Was slavery voluntary? Involuntary? Strictly speaking, much of the slavery that we see in the Old Testament was voluntary. That is, one could
read the Oriental Institute seminar with the top ancient Near East scholars. They all said it was involuntary. I mean, sorry, voluntary. Gosh, I had it mixed up. The whole Oriental seminar said it was voluntary. And people like Josh Bowen know this, and they still call it slavery. How can something be voluntary and constitute chattel slavery? How the fuck can you square that circle? Objective ethics. You want me to pull out the citations from the Oriental Institute seminar, or the Oriental Seminar Institute, either, whatever you say it.
sell himself or those under his control into slavery in order to stave off poverty or to make good on a debt. However, two things need to be understood. First, involuntary slavery clearly existed in the Hebrew Bible. Second, although other types of slavery were technically legal voluntarily, passages like 2 Kings 4 and Jeremiah 34 tell us that one could be taken.
We just went through Jeremiah 34 and actually proved how chattel slavery can't be true because of kibosh with the foreigners. If you really want to try to attack the Bible, you might as well try to argue that the Jews enslaved their own people and that God endorsed them, but you can't because he's the one rebuking and chiding them for doing it. So which shows the opposite of endorsing slavery or the opposite of condoning slavery. It actually shows God hates slavery. He scolded Israel for that. But if you had any inkling or any glimmer or any hope of trying to slap the charge of slavery on Yahweh, you would have to do it in Jeremiah 34. That would be it. And also what was the other one? We have a whole thing in my book about this too.
Into slavery again clearly existed in the Hebrew. However, two things need to be understood. First, involuntary slavery clearly existed in the Hebrew Bible. Second, although other types.
That's not we have the consensus from the top, the very pristine or the most accredited scholars in ancient Near East scholarship, and they said it's voluntary. Why are you lying?
Of slavery were technically legal voluntarily. Passages like 2 Kings 4 and Jeremiah.
Oh yeah, 2 Kings 4. That's right. So it's in my book, and it has to do with debt. So anyway, I don't want to get like there's just so many things where he's wrong. It's just hard. I don't feel like just doing every single thing that he did wrong. You could just look it up.
Jeremiah 34 tell us that one could be taken into slavery against their will in the moment, and that once enslaved, even as a debt slave, one was under the control of the master and could be kept against one's will. Thus, concerning the shared legal tradition of the Old Testament and the ancient Near East.
Well, you might as might as well debunk this too. So let's go 2 Kings 4 then. Here we go. So Unfortunately, creditors in the Old Testament have been stigmatized by biblical slavery proponents as this guy that we're listening to. However, their prejudice is unfounded, as several scholars have pointed out. Number one, slaves weren't property because only of their service was purchased. And two, creditors weren't property because only their service was, I'm sorry, I'm going to read it from number one again. So, number one, slaves weren't property because only their service was purchased. And number two, creditors weren't just holders. So we already saw in chapter 3 that in the cuneiform tradition, debt slaves were not to be regarded as property of their creditors, since the creditor has only purchased the service of the or capacity for work. This is our Bitzcraft in his source of debt slaves. This view is also advocated by Reisner, Derstrom, and Rashi, etc. So households in Israel were entitled to land grants. Although households held title to the land in perpetuity, it was often lost to creditors. So monarchs taxed households into crippling debt. Rich households made loans to poor households to pay their taxes, but secured these loans by taking their land and labor off their members as collateral. So this is what I was talking about. This has to do with collateral. So when households defaulted, creditors foreclosed on the land and sold its men, women, and children as servants. 2 Kings 4:1. Legally, creditors were not buying land or selling slaves, just holding the land as collateral and collecting the wages of its household to repay the debt. And this is Gregory Church Hagano, one of the sources I mentioned earlier, and M.L. Strauss. There you go. Not hard. Not hard at all.
Westbrook summarizes. Although in practice, economic circumstances, and this is Westbrook 2009b, page 215, although in practice, economic circumstances would often force a person into slavery, the law, in law, his act was voluntary. In other words, we must be very careful when we seek to identify whether individuals entered into slavery of his own volition. There is often a distinction between practical volition and legal volition. And I won't get into it right now, maybe we will later, but we see in the context
legal volition? What?
Of when a person is sold into slavery, it is not generally considered that it is not their decision, that the person that has authority over them, in particular, when a woman is sold into a concubinage, her father is the seller, the purchaser is the object, and the girl being sold is the subject. All right, I'll go ahead and close it out there so I don't go over my time. Thank you very much.
How is a mohar concubinage too?
We still there?
Yep, we still there. Thank
Okay.
you. As soon as you start talking, you're.
Give me a second here. Thank you for that opening.
I did see that, so I'm going to get on to. I like this Amos passage that Jill brought up. Amos 2:6. This is what the Lord says: the people of Israel have sinned again and again, and I will not let them go unpunished. They sell honorable people for silver and poor people as a pair of sandals. So this is where God is outrightly against slavery. So it doesn't follow. It's a genetic fallacy to blame the people and put the blame on God. You can't do that. That's fallacious reasoning.
As a vassal country, meaning their country had been swallowed up by Egypt, a great power, a colonizer, we would say today, or a liberal might say today, and they were a vassal state. So they were subject to Egypt. Egypt was their Washington, D.C. And they were working, and God had no problem. The Pharaoh was a good guy. He was friends with Joseph.
What? Is Jill saying there's no chattel slavery in Egypt? I mean, it literally says it that there was harsh labor in Exodus 1. I guess, this is why Jill has his unique perspectives, and I would disagree with that. I think Exodus 1 makes it clear it was definitely chattel slavery.
But then that Pharaoh dies, and a new Pharaoh comes who did not know Joseph, and he began to oppress.
Oh, I see. He's saying the second Pharaoh. Okay. So he's saying the first Pharaoh was decent. Yeah, I mean, you had the Jews try to put Joseph into slavery, though. Was that under the second one or the first one? I don't know.
And he began to force them to work without pay. Then God says, let my people go. He didn't say that before. So the Bible does make a distinction between chattel slavery and people who are being hired to work voluntarily and are being treated with dignity and respect. And he says no to one and yes to one and no to the other. We can see that in the story of Exodus.
Nice. Good stuff, Joe.
Amos chapter 2 says, this is what the Lord says. We don't care what OE says. The people of Israel have sinned again and again, and I will not let them go unpunished. They sell honorable people for silver and poor people for a pair of sandals. So Amos is a prophet of God, and he's not happy. God is not happy with this behavior.
No, he's not. Also in Jeremiah 34, he's not happy either when the Jews put their own people in slavery. He says they're not going to go unpunished. So how could you say that's endorsing or somehow condoning slavery? Absolutely not. See, all these, like, I'm just like disappointed in the apologetics of the supposed, like, I'm looking at most of the apologetics today. What they try to say is, well, God allowed slavery, but he necessarily didn't approve of it or something. That's weak as shit. Our God hates slavery. Period. Our God is a God of liberation. He liberates the Jews. He liberates everything. Even Jesus says he liberated the captives, which is spiritual captives. You can be spiritually enslaved too. I mean, Jesus is not going to reform the world. I mean, he wants to. He through his gospel, he wants to reform the world, but he's not going to impose and force people to not do slavery. That would violate free will.
Deuteronomy 24:14 through 15. Do not oppress a hired hand who is poor and needy, whether he is a brother, whether he is an Israelite, or a foreigner residing in one of your towns, not an Israelite. You are to pay his wages, whether he is a brother, OE, or a foreigner. You are to pay his wages. Chattel slavery? Show me a chattel slave who got paid wages, and I'll show you someone that's not a chattel slave. You are to pay his wages each day.
Amen. See, Jill has this. He's really good at this part.
Before sunset. The sun couldn't even come up before he had to be paid, according to Israel, the God of Israel, because he is poor and depends on them. Otherwise, he may cry out to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. Doesn't get any clearer than Deuteronomy 24. Leviticus 25. Now, if your countrymen, now this is speaking about Israelites as well. So we have both. In America, we have laws that speak to us as citizens, and we have advantages as citizens, and then we have laws for the foreigners or the visa workers, the ones who are over here working on a visa. They don't have this access to the same privileges we do, but they're not oppressed. They're not treated like animals. So, of course, there are different laws. You had to be a citizen of Israel. Whether you were a foreigner or not, or born in Israel or not, you had to become a citizen of Israel to inherit all of the privileges. Meaning you didn't have to do the harsh labor. But no one is being forced into chattel slavery, OE. No one. Now, if your countryman becomes destitute and cannot support himself among you, then you are to help him as you would a foreigner.
Look at that. You are to help him as you would a foreigner. That's a great passage, Jill. Man, I got to remember to put that one in my repertoire as well. That shows you that there was an already understood ethic within Israel to treat non-Israelites with the highest respect.
You would a foreigner. Wait a minute. I thought those foreigners were supposed to be the chattel slaves. You were to help them as you would a foreigner or a stranger. You are to help both. You are to help the countryman just as you would help the foreigner or the stranger, so that he can continue to live among you. How much time do I have left? Moderator. Can you hear me?
I can't. Sorry about that. Locked up. You are at 4 minutes.
All right, 4 minutes. All right. I'm almost finished. Leviticus 19, thou shalt not defraud thy neighbor, neither rob him. The wages of him that is hired shall not abide with thee all night until the morning. You need to pay them before the sun rises. This is Leviticus 19. And then we also have other passages in see that as well, where he says, woe to you if you're not paying your workers. How dare you?
Another great one is Exodus. Great job, Jill. Exodus 23:9. Good one. And Deuteronomy 10:18 through 19. Beautiful.
You shall not treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, or you shall treat the stranger. Excuse me. You shall treat the stranger. Oh, he wants you to think you shall not. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you. Treat them just like you treat your fellow Israelites. And you shall love him as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. For you were once strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So God is clearly telling the Israelites, hey, don't treat them like you wanted to be treated when you were in the land of Egypt and you were oppressed.
Look at Exodus 23:9. You shall not oppress a foreigner. You know the heart of a foreigner, because for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. That's a utilitarian framework there. I mean, like, how absurd could you be an atheist and have Yahweh using utilitarianism, a utilitarian framework, principle, to show you that there's no slavery, and you still pursue trying to impugn the God of the Bible? You guys are disgusting, slimy, scummy. No excuse. There's no excuse for to try to charge the God of the Bible as slavery. You disgusting reprobates, you are.
In the land of Egypt. And of course, they became strangers in the land of Egypt when that new Pharaoh arrived, right? Exodus 12, there shall be one law for the native and for the stranger who sojourns among you. Exodus 22:21, you shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him. Oh, he's going to find passages in the Bible to suggest that they're being oppressed, but he's not going to be able to demonstrate that. For you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not oppress a sojourner. Exodus 23. It's just a constant theme. You know the heart of a sojourner. For you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. Deuteronomy 10. Oh, he's going to try to convince you that, hey, these slave laws only applied to sojourners, only applied to foreigners. No, they didn't apply to anyone.
And there's really no such thing as a foreigner, an ethnic distinction anyway. We gave like numerous citation for that. What the hell is what does he mean by, what do you atheists mean by foreigner, by the way?
There's no chattel slave laws in the Bible. What they called slavery, we call work. He executes justice for the fatherless.
You're going to say, well, they're ethnically different than Israel. But give scholarship to back that up. The Israelites, even if they, let's just say that there was a distinction of ethnicity, which is you can't find in scholarship. God already says to treat them like one of your own anyway. So like, there's nowhere to go. I'm sorry. This foreigner slavery that Josh Bowen tried to put out there, it's dead. It's obsolete. It's garbage. And shame on you, Josh, for trying to fuel these atheists like you do, especially like Justin. Justin's a little pussy who can't even step up to the plate in a formal debate. He has to take control of the mic and be control of the show. Like Justin, you're a pussy too, dude. Yeah. You know you don't want to. You know that I would slap you around like a redheaded stepchild. Anyone, Josh, you know I have your number, Josh, too. The end. It's over, but you still have to push it because whatever it is, it fuels atheists like this guy. It's like they love to fuel him, maybe because it makes the atheists feel better about the rejection of God. I don't know. It's just depravity, enjoying depravity or something. Who knows?
And a widow, and loves the sojourner, giving him food, clothing. In Israel, you were required to provide 10% of your crops to sojourners, foreigners, people who were passing by. You weren't even allowed to harvest 10% of the outer edges of your crops. Love the sojourner, therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. Constant theme. Ezekiel 47, you shall allot it as an inheritance for yourself and for the sojourners. So those sojourners who were wanted to join the camp of Israel, the tribe of Israel, were set up with an inheritance. Show me a chattel slave that is set up for an inheritance. And I'm going to show you a case study of that in the case of Eleazar and Abraham. Jeremiah 23 or 22. Thus saith the Lord, do just.
Also, Ruth. Ruth was a foreigner as well. And she was bought. Like it's the word bought is the same word in Leviticus 25:44. It's kana. And then this is one point I want to bring to Jill. He tried to stigmatize the word kana when actually the Hebrews were buying their own people in Exodus 21. It was kana. Like it's so ridiculous.
Justice and righteousness, and deliver from the hand of the oppressor him who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the resident alien. Do no wrong or violence to the resident alien, the fatherless, the widow, nor shed innocent blood in its place. And then I want to end with Dr. J. Schuyler, excuse me.
Dr. J. Schuyler. It's Sklar, it's not Schuyler. I wonder if Schuyler got into like in the back of Jill's mind here at the slavery stuff. No, that's hilarious, man. Schuyler fiction. Me and Jill went at war with Bowen and Schuyler fiction for years. Now that's funny.
He says this in English. We regularly use commercial language. This is speaking to some of the language that's used in the Bible. Property, purchase. All of these words don't mean what they mean to us today. So we have a bit of a presentism fallacy being committed when you suggest that, hey, property means this. No, property means whatever they said it meant in the ancient Near East. We use commercial language but Jay Schuyler is going to actually argue something very interesting, that we still use this language today, even though we don't mean you're a piece of furniture. Terrell Owens.
Terrell Owens.
Michael Jordan, you're just a piece of furniture. No. There's still a remnant of this type of.
So his argument is, well, they can back out of their contract or something at that. So the atheist was arguing that they are buying the contract, not the person. But that's exactly how the persons were described by as contracts. I'll argue too, adoption through manumission was also a legal contract that they had to go to court and have a contract with the master. There's still all servitude was demonstrated by contractual labor. And you even see this in Exodus 21, that if you even knock out a tooth or a eye, that they're going to be released out of their contract. And that's what you're claiming is slavery there. So there's nowhere to go, you atheists. There's just nowhere to go. You're done. You're cooked. You've been cooked. Show me where there's contractualist labor in Israel. Are you saying Leviticus 25 and Exodus 21 are different? So you're going to have to figure that out. Why does Exodus 21, 26, and 27 say that they have contracts? Oh, you didn't think about that, did you? So then it's just like whistling in the dark. Then you have nowhere to go. You have no. Give me citation where manumission through adoption through manumission through adoption was a contract or contractless scenario. Good luck.
Way of speaking about human beings, even still today. So why is it that when we go into the biblical text, we suggest chattel slavery when we see the word property, when we see the word owned? Listen to Dr. Schuyler. We regularly use commercial language to describe people within the context, and when the context is commercial. If you go to Leviticus 25, the context is commercial. For example,
Sklar's right. Exodus 21 proves that the foreigners had contracts.
Example, trading a player to another team as one might trade a stock, or transferring an employee to another location as one might transfer money. We don't use this language because we view the people involved as less than human. We use it, again, still today, to this day, as was then. We use it.
So that's how you would have refuted this guy, because I'm guaranteeing this. His name is Objective Ethics. So yeah, good luck with that, being an anti-realist. How can you be a moral anti-realist and have objective ethics? Unless you're saying that they're like brute facts or something, which is retarded. But anyway, I don't want to get to that's a whole other debate. But Jill, all you had to do when he said that, but the NBA is different compared to Israel because the person could opt out of their contract and they can leave out of their contract or whatever and leave and not participate. Well, that was the same. There was still there was contracts being swapped around from one master to another master, and also that they had contracts. So yes, there were contracts with the foreigners. So it is like it was the contract was what's important, not the person, which shows us it's not chattel slavery.
Even though more frequent, more archaic, more ancient, but that's okay. But we still use it today because it accurately describes, as it did then, their circumstances in a given commercial context. To say that servants are property, Leviticus 25, 45, or inherited, verse 46, is not to put them on the level of furniture any more than to say a sports star is traded, puts them on the level of a stock. Okay, that's Dr. J. Schuyler. And
okay, we're up to
Dr. J. Schuyler.
Yeah, if you want to take up, if you want to finish up another 30 seconds.
Okay, all right. Just quickly on the technically some
notes. Let me know when you want me to start.
All right, we are.
The straw man fallacy, and we see this happening a lot with Christians trying to use Jill is the gift that keeps on giving. In his opening statement, we've only so far heard his opening statement, and we've already gotten a number of blunders. So one of them would be the straw man fallacy, and we see this happening a lot with Christians trying to use this terrible analogy of the sports contract that's being traded, and they try to relate this to slavery laws in the Old Testament. And this is a straw man. What a straw man is, for those of you who don't know, is an attempt to reframe an argument into a weaker position so that you can then defeat the argument. In regards to a sports trading contract, what that is a contract that's being traded, not an actual player per se. The player represents the value of the contract itself. The major difference here is that the player has the ability to opt out. They can just not play. They can not participate in that agreement. The slave does not have that right. So this is a straw man because it's not related to the argument whatsoever. In fact, I would almost say it's such a bad stretch that it's a red herring, but we can just go with straw man. Jill mentioned...
No, it's really not. It is. I would disagree with that. And also you lied about, you said that the laws of Hammurabi had 3-year contracts and the Bible is worse because they had 7-year contracts. That's just total bullshit. That's another lie. Let me pull this up. Man, like I would have caught this guy in so many lies. He would have left. I guarantee you. Let me get it real quick. Yeah, Isaiah 16:14. Yeah, Isaiah 6. I'm going to pull it up. So he claimed that there was no such thing as this guy lied, like, and Jill, like this. These are things. What do you call it? Constructive criticism for you in the future to be able to squash the lies that come out of these turds' mouth. So Isaiah 16:14, but now the Lord has spoken, saying, within 3 years, as the years of an hireling. So hirelings were 3 years, servants of 3 years. And the glory of Moab shall be contemned with all the great multitude, and the remnant shall be the very small and feeble. So you got it right there. 3 years. So yes, there were 3-year contracts. I don't know where this guy got this bullshit from. Shana. It's a Sakir. Yeah. Sakir's had 3-year contracts. So you have the Toshabs, you have the Sakirs, and you have the Gers. Those are all foreigners. But I'm going to go to Leviticus 25 really quick though, and explain what's going on there, and show what a liar this guy is, and refute slavery in Leviticus 25. So they start from Leviticus 24. I'm sorry. Verse 44 down to 46. So let's read. Both thy bondmen and bondmaids which thou shalt have shall be of the heathen, or the nations that are round about you. Of them you shall buy bondmen and bondmaids. The word there is kana, and it's used in Exodus 21:2 with Hebrews buying their own people, but also it's used with Ruth being bought by Boaz, kana. So it's not a nefarious term. That's ridiculous. And so we go to verse 45. This is where things get very interesting, and no atheist has ever touched this. They can't touch it. So the children of the strangers, Ger. I think this is Ger. Could be Toshab. I think it's Toshab. Yeah, never mind. Toshab. Or it's both. Let me look in the Hebrew. Yeah. You have the Toshab, and then you also have the Sakir. Okay. So in verse 45, you have Toshabs. Moreover, the children of the strangers that sojourn among you, them ye shall buy, and their families that are with you, which they beget into your land, and they shall be your possession, akuzah. And they think that means chattel slavery. And again, I gave J. Battle's paper showing that it is not movable property. It is not defined that way. Yahweh himself is called Akwazah. You're going to claim that he is material possession. So it's patently false that word means slavery. It means economic output, as Glenn, I think his name, let me get his name really quick. Glenn Miller. Yeah. Glenn Miller showed its economic output. Let me read that real quick. Yeah, okay. So here it is. So in keeping with the variableness of nations of property in the ancient Near East, as noted by historians and anthropologists, Israel's notion of property was a severely restricted one, and one that did not preclude the humanity of the servant nor absolve the humanity of the servant, the master from legal responsibility. Or let me read that again. Let me see here. Israel's notion of property was a severely restricted one, and one that did not preclude the humanity of the servant, which was actually cited by Milgram in Leviticus 25:46 too, nor absolve the master from legal accountability. Although Hebrew servants are miscalled property in one verse, 21:21, it's actually kisef. Israel's notion of property in the law was severely restricted to economic output only, not ownership of a disposable good. Both the land and Hebrew servants belong to God always. So it's economic output. Period. Glenn Miller. Just remember Glenn Miller. It's a good citation. All right, I'm going to go back to Leviticus 25 now. So, again, look at the Hebrew. In fact, let me just get the Strong's Concordance up because you can check this out for yourself. Strangers is Toshab. There it is. Toshab. Toshav. And you have the Ger there too. So you have Ger and Toshab in 25:45. Now, this is where they claim that there's this institutionalized chattel slavery. And you shall take them as an inheritance, Nakal. Same thing in Ezekiel 44:28 with Yahweh. Your children after you to inherit them for possession. Exactly what they said about Yahweh in Ezekiel 44:28. And here it is, possessions, Akwazah. They shall be your bondmen forever, which in the Hebrew is olam, and we discussed that earlier. But over to your brethren, your children of Israel, you shall not rule one over another with rigor. But as you're going to see here, they leave verse 47 out. Now, why would they do that? Why do the atheists leave out verse 47? Because it debunks chattel slavery entirely. What they just argued in 44 through 46 is debunked in 47. Listen to it. And of a sojourner, this is a ger, which we saw in verse 45. or stranger, Toshav. So in verse 47, you have the mentions that were mentioned in verse 45 are also mentioned in verse 47. Look what it says. A ger or Toshav wax rich. Literally means wax rich. How can a chattel slave be rich, people? The very definition means that they're oppressed. They can't flourish. So this shows that the same people they're claiming are enslaved in chattel slavery, or their chattel, are waxing rich. That's an oxymoron. That's a self-contradiction. So all you have to do to debunk slavery with these idiots is go to verse 47, folks. Just literally read verse 47. And not only that, there's something else mentioned here that demonstrates also that precludes chattel slavery. Look what it says. So they can not only wax rich, but they also can sell themselves to the foreigners. This is called co-indentured legislation, or co-indentured service legislation. They're selling indentured servants to Israel, and Israel's selling indentured servants to the foreigners. We know that because God literally says, my people will never go back into chattel slavery under Egypt. He's not going to send his people back into chattel slavery. So this is co-indentured legislation here. So the Jews were sending their people to the foreigners, and the foreigners were sending their people to the Jews. There you go. So all you have to do is just read verse 47, and there goes their entire bullshit scheme narrative dissolves just like that. They can wax rich, and they can also sell each other if they're poor. Look at this. We know this isn't another key feature of this passage is wax poor. We know this, that means debt. There's nothing here that hints of chattel slavery at all. So this was co-indentured service legislation, which removes any chattel slavery in 44 through 46. And how do we know that? Because the exact same foreigners are mentioned in verse 47 with the ger and toshavs. And that's as simple as that. Debunking their bullshit fucking slavery narrative invented by God haters. You disgusting individuals you people are. I despise your way of thinking, you disgusting, vile people you are. There you go. That's how quickly you can dispel slavery, folks. You did a great job, Jill. I think you won that debate easily with your presentation, but I think your arguments were pretty good. I would have came at it a different way. I would have been way more aggressive. Yeah, there you go. We'll just watch a couple more minutes and we'll shut her down here.
As I cited in my opening. So could you show me where in Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, that the slave being referred to as property is actually getting paid?
What do you say, the paid? Well, they're working their debt off. That's the same thing as payment. Their payment is being through labor.
In Leviticus 25, 44 through 46, that the slave being referred to as property is actually getting paid?
Oh, yeah. You can answer that, Jill. Verse 47. They wax rich. They're being paid. You can't. To wax rich means they're being paid. Leviticus 25:47, right there, Jill. You could have destroyed him. You could have erased him from the debate, decimated him. That's how we know that they were being paid, the same people in Leviticus 25. It's verse 47, and they somehow pretended it doesn't exist. But it does exist. Much to their chagrin.
I've cited several passages.
Verse 47, Leviticus 25:47 tells you right there.
From
None of
the
those related to the
law.
actual verse, the passage that I cited. So you're conflating
so-
the debt slave with the chattel slave, and I know you're doing this
Yeah.
intentionally. So let's get in.
No, it's chattel slaves an invention. It's the Jews ontologically knew that God owns all people and all things. So the Jews knew that. Like, there's not gonna be a system where they think they own somebody. It's ridiculous.
To the conflation.
There's no
and-
chattel slave. The word chattel didn't exist. Okay. So what I
Yeah, I would just say the principle doesn't exist. But also, verse 47 says that they are being paid.
would suggest, though, is this. When you're reading the Bible, in every case, the Bible is not going to restate that these are people who are hired workers. In some instances, it just may say,
Amen, Daniel. Amen. Jesus is the only way to heaven. Believe this and be saved forever and ever. You know, and like how vile objective ethics is and his immorality. He's very immoral, amoral, and how he attacks the God of the Bible. You know, Jesus still loves you. And you've been brainwashed into hating him. Jesus still wants you to come out of your own slavery, objective ethics, spiritually. I hope you do. I wish the best for you with that. I don't wish ill will on this objective ethics at all. I hope he gets saved, because Jesus paid your sin debt. You don't even have to pay your own sin debt. He did it for you. All you have to do is receive the Lord Jesus, and you go to heaven. And there's no strings attached. You just believe, receive, and you're saved. And all this evaporates, dissipates away. All this stuff.
Yvette or slave. So you can't say, well, you need to find where this person is being paid in this particular section of the law.
25:47, Jill was right there. The same people, the Toshavs and Gers, in 45, 46, and 47. It shows that they are being paid because they're waxing rich. There you go.
This particular section of the book, when that might not be the author's intention to communicate that aspect of that transaction at that point. But if you want to look at Leviticus 25, I think there
Yeah,
is an
you said
instance-
that chattel's not specifically stated in the book. I agree with you there, but chattel is by definition an item of property. And so when I showed you the Hebrew lexicon for Leviticus,
There's actually 12 or 13 definitions of property. Again, check out the beginning of this stream. I cite an actual paper of an expert in that category, and he classifies each one, and he did not, let me repeat, did not put acquisa as movable property or slavery. Let's check it out.
25, 42, 44 to 46, where it says that your foreign slaves are your property, which you may pass down as inheritance. And I showed you the
Yeah. Slavery is forced labor, which the person who is the slave hates to do. Yeah.
index, where the glossary, where it actually shows the concordance, where it shows every single usage of that term, every single instance, every single one, it refers to a material possession.
There's a question.
Well, yeah, you're saying that it doesn't exist. I'm trying to figure out how you came to that.
Yeah, and claiming that acquisa means a material possession is demonstrably false, because Yahweh himself is called acquisa. and he is not a material possession. Well, maybe Jesus if he was in his flesh. So, I mean, could be.
Conclusion, because I
But God in his ontology, no.
just showed you the evidence.
I answered that in my opening rebuttal. The emphasis, and you look up the word ahuza, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Well, I mean, it's technically akuza. Akuza. See if you guys can say that. Akuza.
In the lexicon, the Hebrew lexicon, it does mean possession. Okay, that's an irrelevant factor. It does mean holding. It does mean landed property, and it does mean hereditary possession. But the emphasis is on a legal holding, as you cited Westbrook. There's a distinction between a legal holding, being obligated to pay back someone because you owe them. Like,
I know he cited Westbrook, but I mean, literally, Westbrook contradicts himself in other citations. I don't think Westbrook, he's like a real inconsistent and unreliable source. I mean, he contradicts himself all over the place.
the IRS, you could wind up in jail. There's a difference between a legal holding and someone who is a chattel slave.
Yes, I know, and I cited the distinction. But brother, I cited the distinction. I already pointed.
I mean, you're right, Daniel. Like, forced labor is called kidnapping, and that is punishable by death. Yeah. And that was illegal to do, period.
Pointed that out.
Right.
We know
so the emphasis is on a legal holding or inheritance, not the intrinsic nature of what is possessed. So it's not saying that you are property like a piece of furniture, as I cited Dr. Schuyler on. It's saying you are property, meaning you owe.
Dr. Schuyler. Will Dr. Schuyler fiction come to the office real quick? No, I'm just kidding. It's J. Sklar, Dr. Sklar.
Money. You owe someone money.
No, that's not person. No, Jill, you're just flat out wrong. Let's read 39 through 46 to get the context. This is Leviticus 25 here. Make sure we're talking about the same thing. If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as slaves. They are to be treated as hired workers or temporary residents among you. They are to work for you until the year of Jubilee. Then they and their children are to be released, and they will go back to their own clans and to the property of their ancestors. Same use of property here as in land, as in a material place. Because the Israelites are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you. And
yeah, so you're going to have to make a different argument. You're going to have to say that the people in Leviticus 25:44 are different than the people in 45 and 46, but then you can't. This is the problem. If you actually say that, then you cannot say there's chattel slavery anymore in verse 46, because the people that are in verse 45 are the Toshavs and the Gers in 47, which says they can wax rich. So, I mean, you're screwed either way. Like, even if you wanted to say that the people are different in 45 and 46 and 44, you're still in a big conundrum, because then who the hell are the people in verse 44 if they're not the Toshavs and the Gers? So, I mean, either way you lose. Like, there's nowhere for you to go.
Members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. Same use, property. The distinction, it's telling you right there. There are hired workers, as hired workers or temporary residents, verse 40. Verse 44, from them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born into your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property, and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. We get the distinction, and this is what the scholarship pointed out.
There is no legal distinction. I gave, numerous citations from real scholars that there is no legal / ethnic or foreigner. There's no such thing as a legal foreigner. But anyway, I think I'm going to end it there. I don't want to repeat all my points. Jill, great job. I think you won the debate hands down. And I don't think this guy wants to debate me. It'll be a long, long, long day for him, and a terrible one. But the challenge is out there nonetheless, and probably I want to see if he's going to do it on Standing for Truth's platform. I think that would be a better platform than the other one. So hopefully that was beneficial, edifying, educational in some way. There you go. I think that was a joke of a debate for the other guy that thought there was chattel slavery or slavery. And that will end it, y'all. And I will say, God bless America, one nation under God. Amen. If anyone has any questions, just somehow contact me through email or whatever, and I'll help you out. Anyways, God bless everyone. Hopefully that was helpful in some way. Take care, and I will catch y'all later, sooner or later anyway. Maybe tonight, actually. God bless you.